Hi. Okay, so let's start. Tonight, what I want to do is what I plan to do is we're going to continue where we were about David being chased by Shaul. We're going to continue that whole journey. And what I hope to get to tonight is where David is um, so stuck and so free that he even leaves Eretz Israel for a significant time. So we're going to see about that. We're going to see how he ends up being forced, so to speak, by Shaul chasing him and by the situation in the nation, how he ends up being forced to leave. So what I want to start with, I'll do a quick little review. Well, a little bit quick, but we'll go over it quickly just to give us the context of where we are exactly. So to how we all got to the situation, okay? So Shaul, well, I didn't write this, but Shaul loses the malchut and he starts to get this ruach ra'ah, and David slowly starts building himself up. Shaul tries to kill David 2 times when he throws his spear at him when he's playing music for him. So we're going to see actually in this lesson tonight, we're going to see how that parallels how David is going to tonight. Excuse me. We're going to see how he has the opportunity to kill Shaul 2 times and he doesn't. So it's sort of a parallel to that. We're going to see how that plays out. The children of Shaul help David. Michal helps him escape. Yonatan helps him escape with the whole Seudat Rosh Chodesh. I'm just going over this quickly. We discussed all of this just to give us a little bit of where we are. Achimelech, the Kohen in Nob, helps David a little bit unknowingly, and then Shaul responds by having Doeg, his advisor, destroy the city. David goes to Achish, realizes very quickly that it was a mistake, and runs away and pretends to be crazy. We're going to see tonight again that he goes to Achish, but this time he stays there. We're going to see how that happens. We saw how his family and followers began to congregate with him from Marat Adulam. He leaves his parents in Mitzveh Moab. People of Keilah need his help against the Plishtim. And if we remember, even when he helped them against the Plishtim, they felt they were afraid and were about to give him up to Shaul, and he ran away. In Chorsha, he meets with Yonatan, where Yonatan basically says, I know you're going to be king. I want to be your second. I accept my place. We spoke about all this last time. So as we see, it is not a simple journey. What's going on, the feel of the nation is they're slowly realizing David is the natural leader. He's emerging as a leader. He's helping them, even though Shaul is chasing him. He's helping them when Shaul should be the one helping them, but he's so preoccupied with chasing David. We also see, so we saw that with the whole David and Shaul dynamic. We also see that the nation realizes that Shaul is not in an okay place, right? He's destroying a city of Kohanim. He's not acting as a leader should, but they're afraid because they also don't want to be killed and destroyed, obviously. So the nation themselves, if we're thinking of what's going on, not only David and his people, but the whole nation themselves is at this sort of what word am I looking for? Like confusing, uncertain place of what their stability as a nation. And if you remember when we spoke about last time, when the people came to David, a lot of those people were people in bad economic states. The economy and the feel of the nation was not necessarily so great in the time of Shaul. Tonight, we're going to also talk about 2 very important characters, Avner, the general, the Sar Sava of Shaul, and Yoav and Avishai, 2 brothers that were generals of David. So we're going to get to that also tonight. It's going to be important they're going to be very important in the narrative. Okay, so now we meet David now at this point in Zif, in Midbar Zif, and the people of Zif, the Zifim, they're called, right? They tell Shaul, Halo David mesater imanu. David is hiding with us. They give him up. They give up his place. And Shaul is so excited. He's like, oh, someone finally is helping me. Someone finally is on my side. And if you remember in this, before he was complaining, before Nov, he was complaining to his advisors, no one's helping me. Everyone's on the side of David. And he's so thankful. He's using this language, you pitied me. Like he's making himself this whole we're going to see it's this whole narrative in his head that he's this, in a horrible situation that David wants to kill him, and he's distraught, when in reality that's not the reality, as we'll see. So now, as he's about to basically, like, he was at this point, he really could have got David. David was cornered by the Zifim, by the people of Ziph, the Zifim, and by Shaul's men. They were coming in. However, at this point, Shaul gets a message. Malach means a messenger. Shaul, lemor mahera lecha ki pashtu plishtim ala aretz. He gets a message that the plishtim are infiltrating the land. So, and that Shaul at this point, which at this point is surprisingly so, he chooses to go fight the Plishtim. And this place is called Sela HaMachlokot. They named this place the rock of machloket, of indecisiveness, because Shaul really didn't know which side to pick. Should I go defend the people from Plishtim, or should I go continue chasing David? And at this point, he has a second of clarity, so to speak, and he goes to fight the Plishtim. However, the Mefarshim talk about the fact that we don't hear about what happened. We don't hear if he won. We don't hear if he lost. We don't hear what happened to the Plishtim. We don't hear anything about the war, because to him it was a nuisance. It was a sidetracking from his main goal, which was to get David. So we see how we said last week after the Sudat Rosh Chodesh, David realizes this, Shaul sees this, Yonatan realizes this, that really his shift is not being king and protecting the nation, but is being self-involved and freed and defending himself from Shaul, from this imagined fear he has of David. So, by the way, I just try to think, like, what's going on. Obviously, I don't have an answer to this, but this is just something that I think about when about this when I go through this story, is what was going on. And again, I obviously don't have the answer to this. What was going on in the minds of the people of Shaul? Were they, on the one hand, just placating the king and helping him and afraid for their own lives? Or did they really believe that there was a threat of David and his people? Like, what was really going on? Because as we're going to see through the rest of the lesson tonight, it's very hard to really convince yourself that Shaul has a viable threat of, So it's just interesting. I said obviously I don't have the answer, but it's just interesting to think about what was the dynamic and the thought process of the people. We also see, by the way, which is interesting, that when Shaul takes his people to go fight chase David, he takes 3,000 people, top of Israel, and he wants to go fight David. He also did this similar language when he started his war against the Plishtim in the beginning of his monarchy, way back in the beginning. So we see again here his military tactics, his psyche, everything is shifted from being a king to defend my nation, and being someone and shifting to someone who is totally, one-track minded. I need to get David. So now we get Shaul fights the Plishtim. Like I said, we don't necessarily know what happens, but he finishes whatever happened there, and he's back on the run for David. Now David goes to Ein Gedi. If anyone's ever been to Ein Gedi, it's a beautiful place. It's in the south of Israel. That's happening in southern Israel, the desert area. And he gets to Ein Gedi, and if anyone's ever been there, it's beautiful. It's very nice, but it's a desert, and there's a lot of caves, and a lot of mountains. So David is hiding in there, and they tell, says Vayaged lo lemor, it was told to him, someone else ratted out David, that he was in Ein Gedi. And Shaul takes the people, like I said, he takes his army, and he goes to try to find David. And now what happens is, if you in Ein Gedi, like I said, there's all these caves. So if you could try to imagine, I should have brought pictures, I forgot. But anyway, if you could imagine, there's these caves, and they're deep caves, and obviously it's dark, right, in the cave. There's no sunlight. So if you can imagine, David and his people are deep within the cave. And now Shaul has to go, go to the bathroom, go relieve himself, and he goes into a cave to be private. So he happens to go to the cave where David and his people are hiding. And so you can imagine the scene. It's silent, it's dark. They're probably all looking at each other like, oh my God, if he turns around, what are we going to do? What's going to happen? And the people that are with David tell him, "Vayimru anshe David elav, hine hayom asher amar Hashem elecha, hine anochi notenet oivecha beyedecha v'asita lo kasher yitav beinecha." They're like, don't you see this? God is giving him to you in your hands. Like, go. And they don't say outright, by the way, to kill him. They say, asita lo kasher yitav beinecha. They're afraid to say outright, go kill the king. But they're hinting that. They're saying, God put your enemy, in this perfect situation that you could get him. Go get him. And the Hachamim do say that if David would have killed him, he would have been valid in killing him because Shaul was a rodef. He was chasing him. He was defending his life. This was really, as we'll continue to see, and we saw before, if Shaul has an actual opportunity, he's going to kill David. There's no question about it. The only reason he hasn't is because God's protecting David and helping him run away continuously. But there's no doubt in anyone's mind that Shaul wants to kill David. And so David hears this from his people. He gets up. He cuts off a part of Shaul's me'il, his coat, his cloak, and the second he does this, he immediately regrets it. And he tells his people, he immediately turns around and tells his people, this is wrong. I cannot do this. I cannot hurt or kill or to lay my hand on the Mashiach Hashem, the anointed one from God. So it seems to be a little bit out of order. You almost would think that David would have said that before he went to cut the coat. But there's different mefarshim that talk about, was David really going to kill him and he only was able to get to the coat? Did David have his thought process that I'm going to get to the coat and cut and make a point? Like, what was actually going on in David's mind? Obviously, we will never know. But it seems that regardless, David realizes that this was not his place. This is not in his hands to be the one to kill Shaul. And he regrets immediately even cutting the cloak. We see that, if you remember, when Shemuel told Shaul that he lost the malchut with Amalek, Shaul rips Shemuel's coat, and he says that's a sign that your malchut is ripped. So clothing here, we spoke about the clothing with Yonatan and David and with Shaul and David. The clothing is very symbolic. So it is a big deal that David cut his cloak. It was a big sign, so to speak. And he realizes this was not the right thing to do. Shaul leaves the Mara, and then we see, I'll make this a little bigger, hold on, just because if anyone's following Psukim. And David goes out of the Mara, out of the cave, and he calls out to Shaul, and he calls him Adoni HaMelech, my king, my master. So now, even from that, like right away before we even see what David is saying, we see from the introduction that David is automatically putting himself in a subservient place. You are my king. You are my master. He's totally trying to show Shaul that I am nothing against you. I view you as my king. Sort of on those two words, he's hinting you have nothing to fear. All these things to try to reduce Shaul's paranoia. And Shaul sees. And when Shaul turns around, imagine he's calling. He's not like right near him. He's calling, across a valley or whatever it may be. He's a little bit far. And David bows to him, and he tells him, he's saying, why are you listening to these people that are telling you that David wants to do anything bad to you? He tells him, I had the opportunity to kill you. He tells him exactly what just happened. And I will not do anything to you because you are the Mashiach Hashem. And he says, look, I have the piece of your me'il, of your coat in my hand. Okay, so now if you're Shaul, you have this moment of like, you're watching this and you're like, what is going on? David was there. I see him holding my coat. How did this all happen? Um, and also David continues to uh, to lower himself in front of Shaul's eyes. He tells him, "Achremi yetza melech Yisrael." You're melech Yisrael again, amping up Shaul's ego. You're melech Yisrael. Achremi harodef. Who are you running after? Kelev met. I'm like a dead dog. I'm nothing. Achre parosh echad. I'm like a flea. Like I'm insignificant. Why are you chasing after me? Like why? This is not this is not worthy of you. And David finishes his whole speech. And Shaul says, David, is this my son David? He all of a sudden shifts his tone, and you're my son. And he cries and he tells David, Sadika Tamimeni, you are better than me, and you've done good to me, and I've only done bad to you. And then he says, I know that you are going to be the king of Israel after you're going to be the king of Israel, and do shpiali, and promise me that you will not destroy my children after me. And he says yes, and then he moves on. So it seems like this is a nice situation. Shaul sees that David doesn't want to kill him. He calls him Bni, he calls him my son. He cries. It's a whole beautiful thing. But this, as we will see, this is a moment of clarity for Shaul, and it does not last. So now we see a little interjection by Amot Shemuel, by Peru Oto Barama. Sorry, sorry, this is just blocking. 1 second. Barama, yeah. So we have this little interjection that Shmuel dies, and now it's very interesting that it is. So we don't know if actually chronologically he died at this moment, or it just chose to tell us at this moment. But it is interesting to note that right after Shmuel's prophecy comes true, that David is going to be the next king, and Shaul admits this, is what then Shmuel dies. It's sort of like a well-rounded, thing that he finished his mission, so to speak. So Shmuel dies, and they make the funeral, and we see David runs away again, and he's not confident in Shaul's little speech there, and he's crying. He's not confident about it. He runs away, and we see David. Sorry, I keep pushing. We see David. We're going to see a little bit of a break of the David Shaul interaction for like a little sub story going on, which we'll see how there's a second time after this. We have what we just read now, that David could have killed Shaul and he didn't, and then we have this story now, which I'm going to talk about right now, and then we have another story where David could have killed Shaul, and we're going to see how, even though those two stories seem very similar, the story in the middle is going to shift them, and we're going to see the character shift of David. So I didn't bring all of Sukkim. It's a long story. I'm going to say a lot of it out. I'll tell some of it, but bring some Sukkim. Basically, we get to the story where there's this guy named Ishva Ma'onu Ma'aseo Bekarmel. He was a man, Gadol. Yeah, he was Gadol Me'od, meaning he was very wealthy. He had a lot of sheep. And Shem Ha'ish Naval, Veshem Ishto Abigail. His name was Naval. His wife was Abigail. Haisha Tovat Sechel Ve'ifat Toad. She was a Tovat Sechel. She was bright. She was smart. Ve'ifat Toad, and she was beautiful. Va'ish Kasheh, and he was tough. Vera, and bad, evil. Malalim Vehu Kalibi. He was so Vaishma David B'midbar Ki Gozez Naval Hason. So no, David hears. So we get the background of Naval and his wife. Naval is not portrayed as the greatest guy, and Abigail is actually the only woman in Tanakh that is both said to be smart and beautiful. Very interesting, and we'll see how. I mean, we don't see evidence of her beauty, obviously, other than it's told, but we definitely will see how she is very, very smart in a minute. And Naval is not that he's not smart, he's not a good person. And David hears that Naval is going to be Gozez et Hason. He's going to do a sheep shearing party. And we see many different times in Tanakh, sheep shearing was a big deal, because when they would do the sheep shearing, it was basically like getting in their inventory, and and they would do a big party, and they would have a lot of food and a lot of celebration and all that. So David hears that this is happening, and he wants to get invited to this party to get food. He's obviously on the run. He's obviously not living the most luxurious life. And he hears this and he wants to get some food, and he sends a message to Naval's people, can we please come? And Naval answers him very, very not nicely. He tells him, Mi David umi ben Isha hayom rabu avadim hamitparshim ish mipnei Adonai. Like, who is this guy? What do I have to do with him? Lakachti et lachami ve'et beni ve'et tevachti. I'm going to take my food and my water and I'm going to give it to this guy. Lo yadati emi zehema. I don't know who this guy is. He's a nobody. He's a no one. And David hears this. I mean, I did it, then basically the messengers come back. They tell him all that. And David hears this, and he tells his people, get your swords ready. They all get ready. They all get their weapons ready. 400 men get ready to go fight Naval and destroy his household. David is very insulted. Now, the question comes is, why would David expect to be invited to this? Why would David expect to have Naval give him anything? And we learn, I didn't bring Psukim, but we learned that the workers of Naval did have a connection with David and his people, because they were protecting them and helping them in the field with the sheep. They were making sure they were protected. So he didn't necessarily need to go out of his way to be nice to them, but when David's asking, he definitely could have, helped him out a bit. And we see, by the way, that it does not seem like the other people that were afraid of Shaul that didn't want to help David. It seems like he genuinely is just like, who's this guy? I don't want to do a chesed to him. I don't want to help him. So it doesn't necessarily seem like he's afraid of Shaul. It seems like he's just genuinely not a man who's going to help another person. But we see his wife is very smart. We started the story with that she was smart, and we're going to see here. Basically, Abigail hears this whole story from her servants. They tell her this is what's going down, and David's coming now because of he's afraid because he's going to fight Naval. And Abigail gathers food, and she makes her way down, food and drink, and makes her way down to David's camp. And we're going to see through this long speech, we're not going to read it all, but we're going to look at some important points to convince him to not destroy her family. First of all, if you see, she sort of takes a lesson from David's book when he talks to Shaul, and she sort of puts herself as a shivcha and a amatcha, as a servant and a someone who's subservient to him. And also, we see the same language with Chana in the beginning, with Chana and Eli, when she says, Amatcha, your servant. And she says, don't listen to my husband. He's Ish HaBelial. Again, that Ish Belial, we saw with Bnei Eli, with the Anshe Belial that didn't help Shaul. He's evil. He's a nobody. Like, don't take his words to heart. And she says, Kishmo Kenhu, like he's like his name, Naval, like, Naval B'Shut Torah, like someone who's not like doing things 100%, doing them right. And I didn't see this. I would have sent you. I would have helped you. Like, I didn't know. And again, she calls him Adoni. If I'm remembering, 14 times she calls him Adoni, my master, my master. And she says, she again tells him, this good is going to come and you will be the leader. Don't let this situation be a stumbling block for my master. And to spill cold blood, worthless blood. So basically what's happening here is she's sort of getting him to realize in his own, through her speech, but also in the way she's saying it, by continuously calling him Adoni, by continuously referencing Hashem, because I forgot, she says, Ki melchamot Hashem Adoni Nilcham, you're a warrior of God. She's referencing God, she's referencing his relationship to God, and the fact that he's that God's protecting you, and this is not your battle to fight. God will protect you. God's going to make you leader. She's talking to David's language, right? Of always everything being in God's hands, right? We said this is David's language. This is Yonatan's language. Hayishua is from Hashem. All of that. And she says, don't let this situation be a mechshol for you. which means like to be a stumbling block, because she's saying when you become king, this is going to be tainted. This is going to taint your leadership that you acted out of this fury. And David realizes this, and he says, Baruch Hashem Elohei Israel Asher Shalachecha. Blessing God that sent you, because you really did stop me from doing a really bad thing. And I'm not going to go, if it wasn't for you, I would have killed everyone, and I'm not going to go to fight Naval now. I realize this is a mistake. This is not the right time. So we see it through Abigail's wisdom and Abigail's ability to speak and to appease David and to speak to his. She also talks as if he already made the decision. Like, when you will become king, all these things. She talks in a way that makes him see the clarity. And we see that this calms him down, and he has the patience that we see that Shaul never has. The impulsiveness, the not connecting to God, not asking God that happens to Shaul, David has now. And I'm not going to go so into this now, but it's just interesting to note there are a lot of similarities between David and Esav, right? Esav being Edom, being red, not Admoni, and a lot of similarities. But the main difference the Hachamim talk about is that whereas Esav killed for his own pleasure and his own gain and his own benefit, David fought the milchamot of Hashem, fought the wars of God. And we see here that, in my opinion, the real person and the real ability for David to do that is a smart woman behind him. And we see that later, right after this, Naval dies, and David marries Abigail because he sees her wisdom and he wants that to be part of his life. So she marries her. And we see that he is obviously influenced by her throughout his life, as we'll see. So now, after this story, right, after this whole saga of this sidetrack of David almost following his impulses and almost going to kill out this Naval and all this story, we see the Zifim again, the people of Zif, who are not the biggest fans of David. Well, actually, we don't really know if they're not the biggest fans. Are they against David? Are they afraid of Shaul? Either way, but they again tell Shaul where David is, and Shaul comes to camp near David in Givat Echalim, and David hears this, and he decides to sneak into Shaul's camp at night and see what's going on. So he goes down to Shaul's camp, and he goes with he goes with Abishai, one of his generals, and we see that it paints the scene for us. David goes down, and everyone's sleeping. It's the night, and Avner ben Ner sar sva'o Shaul shoched b'ma'agal. We see the people. We see again that Shaul is always afraid of intruders. He's very insulated physically and mentally. He's very insulated, and he's sleeping in a circle. The soldiers are in a circle around him, and him and his general Ned are in the middle. And David said, we'll go down and they go in the night. And they're sleeping. Everyone's sleeping. Again, and his spear is right next to him. And again, this constant reference always being near his spear is in contrast to, if we remember the whole speech David gives to Goliath, so David always saying, I don't necessarily need the biggest sword, the most defense. I have God with me. And Shaul is so, gripping literally and figuratively so tightly to his sword and to his physical protection, which in the end don't save him. So he has his sword lying next to him, and he has and Abner Abner and the nation are with him. And Abishai tells David, very similar to what the nation told David in the cave and in Gedi, Siger Elohim hayom et oivecha be'edecha v'ata akenu na bechanit uba'aretz pam echad ve'lo eshne lo. And now Abishai is very verbal. He doesn't hint at it. He says, take the sword, stab him into the ground, and that's it. You won't have to do it twice. You'll kill him, and you'll be done with all this. And David says, he says, how can I kill the Mashiach Hashem and be clean and not be guilty? And David says, "Hi Hashem, ki im Hashem yafenu o yavo umet bo b'malchama yered v'nispa." He said, maybe he'll die in a war, he'll die another way, but I'm not killing him. Chalila li Hashem mishalach gad v'mashiach Hashem. Again, constantly Mashiach Hashem. I can't do it. And he tells him, Kach na, Shaul, David tells Yoav, Abishai, Kach na tachanit asher min hashov et tapachat hamayim, take his spear and his water, and we'll leave. And then we see right away that's quickly by Kach David tachanit. So he says to Abishai to do it, and then I think quickly he regrets it because he thinks Abishai too close will kill him. So David takes it and they leave. And we see that God is helping him, because how did no one hear this? No one heard this. They were in a deep slumber from God. No one woke and heard them. So now, David takes the sword and the water, and he runs to the, this time it specifies that it's merachok rav, right? He goes very far from Shaul. He's afraid. And this time, David does not call out to Shaul. He calls out to Avner ben Ned, and he basically bashes Avner and says, "How are you, Avner? You are ben Mavet. You are worthy of death because you didn't lo shamarta al adonechem Mashiach Hashem." He called out Avner for not protecting the king and saying, "You're worthy of death because you didn't protect the king," and he could have been killed. And he lifts up the sword and the water and says, "Look, I was right there. I could have killed him, and you didn't protect him." So again, David, he has the voice, David, and then he says, and again, he gives this whole speech, "Why are you running after me?" Here, Shaul actually admits, "Chatati shuv, I sinned again." And he blesses him. You'll be successful. I'm blessing you. Like, it seems all is well, but David realizes, and they separate. Sorry. So before I point out what happened, we talk about what happens after. Let's discuss what actually happened here a second and see how it might seem similar, but it's very significantly different to what happened before in En-Gedi. So we see how in En-Gedi, this was a coincidence, so to speak. It happened upon David that Shaul was there, that he could have killed him, and he didn't. And he cut the cloak out of impulse, maybe, or it wasn't necessarily so clear that he was trying to prove a point. It could have been impulsive. It could have been that he was, trying to do something to wound him or whatever, but he doesn't. And in the story in the Gebat Chalim al Pnei Simon, in the nighttime, we see it was all thought out. David consciously goes down to Shaul's camp. He consciously takes the water and the spear. He's doing this specifically to make a point, to show his righteousness, not in a way like, "Oh, I'm so great," but to prove to Shaul, "I am actively able to go kill you, and I am not. Please listen and realize that I am not a threat to you." So we see that this was thought out. This was done with foresight. This was done with calm and patience, and Shaul sees that because he does bless David in this time when he didn't bless him before. So it's just interesting, and I could argue that I think his whole interaction with Abigail about Naval taught him this letting go and putting it in God's hands and saying, "I'm not going to be the one to kill Shaul, and he's gonna die on his own a different way, the same way Naval did, and I'm gonna protect myself and defend myself, but I'm not gonna be the one to act rashly and impulsively." Now, after this happens, even though it seems like Shaul is blessing David, "Oh great," David knows this is the same song and dance. He has no faith that Shaul is not going to want to kill him 5 seconds from now, and David thinks in his heart, "Asafeh yom echad beyad Shaul." Like, it's inevitable that at some point, with the way that the whole tone of the nation is going, I'm going to end up in the hands of Shaul. Shaul's going to get me. Like, there's people ratting me out. He's the king. He has much more people than me. Like, just logistically, he says, there's no way that Shaul is not going to get me. And litov ki amalet amalet el eretz plishtim. I have no choice but to run to the plishtim. And once I leave, and David thinks that once I leave Eretz Israel and I'm out, out of sight, out of mind, once I'm out of Gvul Yisrael, he won't chase me outside of Israel. Like once I leave and I go to the police team, he's gonna leave me alone. And David does go to Achish now. We'll talk about it in a second, but I want to just talk about. I didn't bring it up yet, but where is it? That he tells Shaul. Wait, where? Hold on. Yeah, he tells Shaul. Where is it? I can't find the pasuk. I can't. Okay, I can't find the pasuk right now, but basically he tells him that you're forcing me to leave to leave Israel. You're forcing me to worship Avodah Zarah. You're forcing me to leave the land that I love, and he actually does leave. I can't find the pasuk now, but that's what he tells them. And now, so he runs to Achish, to Melech Gat, and Shaul hears this. And this is the end of basically the end of Shaul running after David. David's thoughts were correct. If I leave to the police team, then Shaul won't chase me, and this is true. So now, very interesting. I'm going to talk about this now for a second, and then we're gonna sum up. But basically, what happens is Shaul's going to the police team. Now, in the beginning, this was almost a death sentence for David. So I say Shaul, David. David goes to the police team, and in the beginning, when he first was running from Shaul, and he goes to the police team, he realizes the police team are going to kill him if they talk behind his back. Isn't this David? Isn't this the one who fought Goliath? Who is this guy? Why does he think he could come here? And then he does the whole song and dance that he's crazy, and he runs away. So he with open arms. We're going to talk about this more next week. I want to focus more on because next week we're going to talk about. Basically, there's a split screen, so to speak, of David by the police team and what happens there, and then Shaul and the end of his life, and the end of his life fighting the police team as well. So we're going to see that the next week's lesson is basically going to be about those two parallel stories and how they intertwine, and essentially ending with the death of Shaul. But we'll talk about that next time. But basically, what I want to end with now is David got to this point where it is so public what's going on, right? We said last time that it's not like today where it's all on social media and the news and everyone knew what was going on. They didn't necessarily know in the beginning of all this how bad it was for David running from Shaul. Now it seems like enough time has passed. All these instances have passed, all these different places that David is running. People are hearing what's going on. So the police team are really, Achish and the police team, well, not all the police team, but Achish specifically has this feeling that David is so but David is so anti-Shaul right now that he's willing to leave his own nation and come help me against Shaul because Shaul is torturing his life. So he welcomes David with open arms, which if you're talking logistically, that does make sense because what other than the fact, which is a big fact, but other than the fact that David is also Mashiach Hashem, right? Shemuel also anointed him, and he also is someone who's constantly connected to God. In the normal world, if this was going on, that it wasn't someone that had the nevuah and had the Mashiach that was Mashiach Hashem, it makes a lot of sense that he's gonna go leave and want to kill Shaul and be anti his nation, who keeps ratting him out to Shaul. So Achish has that, has the right direction. It's just a credit to David's connection to God, and how and connection to his people, because we're going to see what happens when David is in the police team, how he's secretly helping the people, the Am Israel throughout. So basically, through all this story from last week to this week, we see that this whole thing is one-sided. Shaul wants to kill David. He is consumed with it. However, it is unwarranted. David wants nothing but for Shaul to live his life and finish out his malchut, and he does not want to threaten him. He does not want to take any leadership till it's the right time. He's being patient about it, and we see that even when he almost acted rash with Naval, he is brought back down to earth by Abigail. And he quickly fixes that situation. And we also see that if David is able to rule these people that are understandably so, wanting to kill Shaul as well because they're so afraid for their life and so angry about this whole situation. He's able to control them, so we could see also that he's going to be able to lead the nation well as well. So basically, to sum up, we keep seeing throughout this whole saga of running away how David's character is building and Shaul's character is basically falling apart. And Yonatan's sort of stuck in the middle a little bit. Yeah, I think we're going to wrap up here. Like I said, next week we'll talk about David by the police team. We'll talk about the death of Shaul and how that all comes about. So thank you for coming. If you have any questions, comments, I'm happy to hear. And yeah, see you next time.